following sermon was delivered at the 10:30 worship service at the United Methodist Church of Kent. Please enjoy.
As soon as Jesus got out of the boat, we read this morning, a certain man met him. A certain man, we're told, not offered the dignity of a name. The man was from the city, but no longer able to live there. For not knowing what to do with him and with his chaotic behaviors, his neighbors have shut him out. And so, for a long time, he had been living among the tombs, in the place of the dead, the not alive, naked and without a home, unwelcomed, unclothed, and unsheltered. His neighbors even shackle him, we are told, binding his body with iron and with chains. How do we respond to bodies and to behaviors that we don't understand, that don't fit neatly into our categories or expectations or constructed norms? Well, for his part, Jesus refuses to leave him where his neighbors have put him, bound and excluded from his community. For as soon as he got out of the boat, immediately, without hesitation, Jesus looks at the man, looks straight through all that his troubles and his neighbors have put on top of him to keep him in his place. And rather than reacting in fear as others have done, Jesus responds with love and with a longing to include. "What's your name?" Jesus asks the man, immediately getting personal. What's your name? It's a question that affirms that he is indeed a person. Who are you? Tell me about yourself. I wonder how often the man's neighbors had asked his name, or how often they had preferred simply to ignore him. I wonder how long it had been since anyone had asked him questions of any kind instead of just telling him where to go and what to do and how he ought to behave. I wonder when the last time had been that someone treated him like a person, approaching him with curiosity and compassion instead of condemnation and shame. "What's your name?" Jesus asks him, affirming the man's dignity. He is more than a dangerous object needing to be bound in chains. He is more than his illness or whatever is tormenting him. He is more than his troubles. He is a whole human being. He is a beautiful child of God, made in the image of love. And notice when in the story it is that Jesus affirms this man's dignity. Notice when Jesus approaches with compassion. It's not after the demons have been exorcised. It's not after the man is back to himself, not after he has put on clothes and re-entered polite society. It's not after he has started playing by other folks' rules. No, as he is, as we find him in the beginning of the story, living among the tombs, naked, without a home, in his pain, while he doesn't fit neatly into anyone's categories, as he is loved. As he is infinitely worthy of care. "What's your name?" Jesus asks him. "Legion," the man replies, because many demons had entered him. Now, legion is a very specific choice of words here. It is a word that carries a particular meaning. For the man in the story, and for the writer and the first hearers of it, legion did not just mean many or a multitude. Legion was a specific word used specifically for a multitude of Roman soldiers, a military unit containing 5,000 or 6,000 soldiers. Legions were the very specific foreign military power and local police force who kept everyone in their place, where Rome thought everyone belonged. Now, it's unclear, at least to me, whether the man is referring here to Rome's military directly or indirectly. Perhaps he's being poetic here, something like, "I have as many problems as there are soldiers patrolling the streets of my town." Or perhaps he's being more direct and transparent, something like, "My problem is the legion of soldiers who keep harassing me for my papers, who keep me living in fear and living this chaotic sort of life." But either way, whether directly or indirectly, clearly his choice of words here points us toward the presence of Rome's military occupation. The man's body is being occupied in the same way that their land is being occupied, by folks who stop and frisk, who raid their workplaces, who terrorize and take what they want. All of these things, all of this occupation by a colonizer, this presence of a military force, this exclusion by his neighbors, all of this binds the unnamed man just as surely as the irons and the chains. But Jesus, blessed Jesus, won't leave him there. For as immediately as Jesus comes to him and treats him as a person, he delivers the man from all that binds him. Jesus sets him free. And the man's newfound freedom in the story leaves folks around him afraid. Again, notice the sequence in this story. Notice when it is that the neighbors become afraid. It isn't upon Jesus' arrival. It isn't when the man replies that he is occupied by many demons. It isn't even when a large herd of pigs rush off a cliff and drown themselves in a lake. All of that gathers a crowd, but first they come in curiosity, and then we're told they're filled with awe. It's only when they are told how the demon-possessed man had been delivered that they are overcome with fear, and they tell Jesus to get out of town. There is something about deliverance, it seems. There is something about other folks' freedom, especially when that freedom allows folks to live beyond or between our categories. There is something about freedom that frightens us. When folks are freed to live, when folks are freed to love, when folks are freed to move about and to be who they are, there is something scary in all that freedom. Something uncomfortable and unsettling. Freedom isn't always something we want to offer. We prefer folks to stay where we put them, to stay in their place, whether physically or in our perception. We categorize our neighbors and ourselves. There are good folks and there are bad folks. There are allies and there are enemies. There are those who belong here and there are those who don't. And we expect folks to stay in the boxes where we put them. But as the crowd discovered, and as we all discover eventually, when Jesus is around, folks get delivered, folks get freed. And our categories, they get messy. When Jesus enters the mix, folks don't stay put where we put them, and our perceptions are changed about what was and what is and what shall be. The Apostle Paul, for his own part, we might recall, discovered this through his personal experience. When he was blinded by a great light knocked to the ground on his way into Damascus, he was freed in that moment and the process that followed, freed from persecuting others, delivered from the need to perceive others as others. And years later, when writing to the church in Corinth, he'll observe that wherever the Lord's Spirit is, there is freedom. Freedom from what binds us. Freedom from the desire to try to bind each other. Freedom, as we affirm in our baptism, to resist evil and injustice and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves. Freedom, as Paul writes in his letter to the Galatians today, freedom to perceive beyond our rigid old categories and to awaken to our unity in Christ. There is freedom to set each other free. This past Thursday, as you know, was Juneteenth. June 19th, or Freedom Day. This year's celebration marked 160 years since the announcement of freedom in Galveston, Texas, finally notifying folks who were enslaved there and those who tried to enslave them that everyone was free. Now, notably, this was 2 months after the end of the American Civil War and 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was supposed to have taken effect. That Emancipation Proclamation, effective January 1st of 1863, had declared, quote, that all persons held as slaves shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. But because freedom can be scary for us, because it isn't always something that we want to offer, Despite the very expansive wording of that proclamation, it really was quite limited in its scope. It applied only to folks enslaved in states that had seceded from the Union, leaving the sin of slavery untouched, unexorcised, we might say, in border states that had remained united. And literacy for black folks was illegal in many states. Oftentimes, it was illegal even for an African American person to carry a piece of paper that had writing on it. And so information about the legal emancipation of folks was quite easily suppressed, controlled, and withheld. And so it took a long time for emancipation to be realized. It took 2.5 years for some folks even to hear about it. And then more than a century after that, for some of its freedoms finally to be codified through multiple constitutional amendments. And undeniably, still to this day, in so many ways, still we have a long way to go in realizing not just legal emancipation, but true and actual freedom, liberation, equity, full and equal inclusion among descendants of those who were enslaved and the descendants of those who enslaved them. There's something about deliverance. There's something about other folks' freedom that frightens us, especially when that freedom allows folks to live beyond the categories where we put them. There's something about freedom that scares us. And so when we perceive it, when we hear about it, when we see it, like the folks in today's gospel, we tell Jesus, that eternal liberator, to get out of our towns. Our neighbors experience some freedoms that we previously didn't allow them, a small crack in our rigid categories, and we react with a push in the other direction. Our history, unfortunately, is filled with countless examples of this. The creation of the KKK, for example, as a reaction against political freedoms during Reconstruction, or the violence of the Red Summer as a reaction against freedom of movement during the beginning of the Great Migration, or the Tulsa Massacre as a reaction against economic freedom on Black Wall Street. Or another anniversary marked this past week, 10 years ago this past Tuesday, the murder of 9 people during a Bible study at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston as a reaction against siblings of color not staying in their place. And throughout this whole past decade, the continuing resurfacing of white supremacy in our churches and in our politics. All of it so very much like the community in today's gospel, the community who expels Jesus from their town as a reaction against their neighbor's freedom. Today's gospel and the story of Juneteenth and so much of our history reminds us that freedom is complicated, it is uneven, and it is sinfully slow. Bad news travels fast, it has been said. Good news takes the scenic route. Good news, full freedom, full peace with justice, takes far too long. Yet nevertheless, God persists in it. Nevertheless, Christ stays with us, and God's Spirit keeps delivering us, freeing us from all that divides us, freeing us from all that binds us, freeing us from all the ways that we try to bind each other, freeing us to celebrate rather than to exploit the beautiful differences that are a part of our creation, freeing us from all our fears. For the truth is that other folks being more free doesn't make any of us less free. It makes all of us a more beloved community. Thanks be to God for that. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the United Methodist Church of Kent Sermon Podcast. For more information about the church, visit www.kentmethodist.org.